In the last video, we were able to see the first validation that we added, that is to check if the input fields are empty. We click on it, we see that the input fields are empty. But when we have, if we go back, refresh, then we just add a test inside one of the input fields and we click submit, we'll see that the error message did not appear because the input field is not empty. So what we are going to do now in this video is we are going to check if they meet some certain criteria, not just checking if the input fields are empty or not. So to do that, we're going into our reg.js and we're going to be using what we call regular expressions. Now for JavaScript, regular expressions are patterns used to match character combinations in strings. There are different patterns used to match character combinations in strings. And in JavaScript, these patterns are used with the exec and test methods of the regular expression. And in this case, we'll be using just the test method. And also, these patterns are used with the replace, the match, the string, or the search and split methods of strings. So as I said earlier, we'll just be using only the test methods. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create separate functions to test. Then we call the functions inside of this if statement or inside the if conditions. So the first thing we are going to do is for the first name and the last name, since we are going to be, they are almost the same, we're going to be using this single function to validate both. So we'll start with the first name. We create a function outside of the document. We create a function, then we'll call it inside. So to create a function, we call the function, we can give it a name and call it like something like is name valid. So we start with function, then we'll say is name valid. Then we can pass it a parameter, and the parameter will pass is name. So the reason why we are passing in this parameter is when we call this function, it's valid. We're just passing this variable that we have here that holds the value. So we pass in the parameter. Now, what we want to do is we're just going to return the regex pattern or the regular expression pattern. So when we call this function, we're going to check if the value inside of this function is not equivalent to the return value, then it's going to throw an error. So in this case, we are going to return something. I have the regular expression somewhere, so I'll just copy and paste. So you can just pause the video to copy it out. Now this is what we have. So the function is going to return this regex expression. So when we call this function, whatever is going to be passed inside of this function, if it's not equal to what we have here, then it's going to throw an error. Now what this simply states is the string that is going to be passed in here must contain a capital letter, but we have this flag here which said it can ignore the uppercase, and also we use the test method. So with this, it returns this string, then test it with whatever is going to be passed in, and also the lowercase tests it. And here also we are checking that the string must be between length 7 and 15. So if it's below 7 or if it's greater than 15, then it will return an error because it does not match what we have here. So we already have the function. The next thing is to call the function inside the if condition for the first name. Now the way we're going to do it is we're going to say if the first name is equal to empty, or we call the or function. So we're going to say if first name equals to empty, or is name valid, then we pass in the first name as the arguments, first name as the argument, but this is going to throw an error because whatever we pass in here, if it's equal to this, is going to throw an error. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say if it's not. So at the front of this, we say if first name is equal to empty or is not equivalent to the return value of this function. So if the value passed in here, the strings passed in here, is different from what we have as the return value here, it's going to throw an error. That is why we are using this this sign, this not sign, or this boolean that signifies false. So if the value here is false, it's not equivalent to what we have as the return, so it's going to throw an error. We can also do that for the last name. We say if it's is name valid, then we pass in the last name as the arguments. So if the string passed as the argument is not equal to what we have here, it's going to throw an error. We can go to our browser to test this out and see. We are making note that we're making sure that it must contain just letters and the length must be between 7 and 15. Now, before we do that, we can just change this error message that we have here. We can change it to something like we can say first name cannot be blank and must be at least between 5, 7 and 15 characters. So we can say first name cannot be blank and must be between 7 and 15 characters. So first name cannot be blank and must be between 7 and 15 characters. So we can copy this and paste also for the last name. So we change this to last name. Then we can go and check it out. We just refresh our page. Then when we click on submit, now we see that the message for the first name and the last name has changed. The first name cannot be blank and must be between 7 and 15 characters. Same with the last name. Now if we refresh, then we add something and say something like and we click, then we see that we don't have any error message because all the characters are, the values are all letters, and they're greater than 7 and less than 15. So we go back and we do the same for the email and the password. Now for the email, we just create a function and we call the function is valid, or we say is email valid. You can pass in a parameter as well. You can see email address. You can do this in another way. We can create a variable. We can call it pattern. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in the regular expression that we want. So I'm just have or use. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to return the value. So we say return pattern dot test. Then it's going to take in the email address. This is it. Then let's quickly just do for the password. Say function is password valid. Yeah, so we pass in an argument. We can call it string. Then we're going to return the value. Then we paste it in here. So for this, what this is saying is the password must contain at least one capital letter, one small letter, at least a number, and the length must be also be between 7 and 15. So this is the validation we're performing on the password. So what we need to do is just go over and we call the functions. So the first one, for the email, we just call or is email valid. Then we pass in the email. So we are checking if the string passed in here is not equivalent to what we have here, then it should throw an error. Also for the password, saying if is password valid, so we pass in the password. So if the strings do not meet this criteria or do not match what we have here, then it should throw an error. Also, we can change this error message here to something different. We can say something like enter a valid email, enter a valid email, and email cannot be blank. Then similarly for this, you can have a large message to explain what we are doing. It says password must be between 7 and 15 characters and must contain at least one lower case letter, one uppercase letter, and one digit. Close. Then we have this and we have the error messages. Let's go and test it on the browser. We refresh, click on the sign up. When we click on the submit, now we see the messages. It says email, or we need to change this. Email is valid and cannot be blank. Enter a valid email. First name cannot be blank and must be between 7 and 15 characters. Last name cannot be the same. Password must be between 7 and 15 characters and must contain at least one lowercase letter, one uppercase letter, and one digit. We need to change some of the text. When we refresh, if we just type in something random, then for the password we type, and we get errors for this. So we've been able to add the validations for all the input fields before they are sent into the database. So in the next video, we'll continue working on the sign up form.